Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Simone here, and today I'm going to be doing a massive unhaul. I was inspired by Leanne because she basically spent like a whole day going through my shelves because I just wasn't inspired to really read any of them. And now my shelves are completely different. I will do a video talking about the books that I do have on my shelves now. But I have a lot of books next to me that I'm going to be doing an unhaul of. But yeah, so I'm literally not really going to give much of a synopsis for any of these books. I will briefly possibly tell you why I'm getting rid of them, but if I'm honest with you, most of them I'm just going to literally go through them because I have a lot and this would take a long time otherwise. So we'll start with The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. I read this one, or I started reading this one and DNF'd it, so now it is going. We then have A Christmas Carol 2, Contagion, which is by Charles Dickens and Bruno Vincent. This is a kind of zombie novel take on A Christmas Carol. I've never read A Christmas Carol and I feel like I can't really start with the zombie version, and I'm really sure about it. We then have The Husband's Secret by Leanne Moriarty. I've read this one. I gave it a 3 or 4 stars. It was fine. I'm not going to read it again. We then have Percy Jackson and the Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan. Again, I've read this one. This is the 4th book in the series, and I do want to read the final book, but I don't want to reread them or keep them. Next, we have 2 books in a series. We have The Amber Spyglass and The Subtle Knife. I'm actually not sure which order they go in. This is from the Northern Lights trilogy by Philip Pullman. I read the first one and enjoyed it for what it was, but I don't want to continue on with the series. Next we have Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a book that I've actually seen the film of and I enjoyed it, but I know the twist, and I believe this is kind of literary fiction, which does not really interest me. Next up, controversially, I am getting rid of, what have we got? The Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages, which are books 2 and 3 in the Mistborn trilogy. I've read the first one, and while I did give it a 5 stars, I have since I don't really remember what happened, and I don't want to reread, and I know that Brandon Sanderson has said some very disrespectful things and he is very homophobic, so I do not want to associate myself with him. Next up we have Tin Man by Sarah Winman, and I read what did I read by her? I read a book by her this year, and When God Was a Rabbit, and I really didn't like it, so I don't really want to try it again. Then we have Blood of an Exile by Brian Naslund. This is a high fantasy and I'm just not that excited about it. Then I'm getting rid of the A Storm of Swords Part 1, Steel and Snow, and A Clash of Kings by George R. R. Martin, because I don't know if you can see, I think I'm sat right in front of it, but my sister bought me the box set for my birthday, so I have like the whole set, so these are just old copies that I do not need. I then have 2 more high fantasy books that I'm just not that interested in. The first is Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. I have heard lots about him, but it's just not really a genre that I really want to pick up. And then we also have a book that I've tried to read a number of times. We have The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Again, as I said, I've tried to read this and DNF'd it too many times that I'm just now not going to bother. We next have The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I have heard lots of people talk about this, but I'm just not that excited by it. We also have Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This one I keep going back and forward on, but I have had it on my shelf for so long and I just don't really want to read it that much. I liked her other book, but this one's not really calling out to me. And I'm also getting rid of 2 books in a series that I have read and I just don't want to reread. We have City of Ashes and City of Bones. City of Bones comes first, which is book 1 and book 2 of the Mortal Instruments series. Also part of the Mortal Instruments series that I'm getting rid of is Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. I've actually read this one. I was just keeping it to reread, but I don't want to reread it anymore. Next up we have Elias Grace by Margaret Atwood. I'm kind of going back and forward about this one, but again, I've read some Margaret Atwood books now. I've read like 2 or 3 of them, and the only one I've enjoyed was Handmaid's Tale, so I'm not really sure that I want to read this one now. Next we have Cleaning the Gold by Karen Slaughter and Lee Child. This is a really short novella, which I would want to read if it was just Karen Slaughter, but Lee Child, it's like book 24 or something in his series, and I don't want to read his series, so I don't want to read this. Next up we have Dear Amy by Helen Callahan. This is a kind of mystery thriller, I guess, but again, it just doesn't sound like something that I'm that interested in, and Leanne, I think, told me that this one's not a good book. So again, we have The Doll Funeral by Kate Hamer. This is a thriller that I'm just not that excited by anymore. And His Bloody Project by Graham McRae Burnett. Again, this is a book that I was excited to read, but then I started trying to read it and I just wasn't really hooked. Another series that I am not going to continue, so I'm getting rid of the books that I own from it, is Shadow's Edge and Beyond the Shadows by Brent Weeks. I've read the first one. Again, it wasn't particularly special. It was a 3-star for me, and this is not really calling to me anymore. We then have Trial by Fire by Josephine Angelini. This is a book that I actually relatively recently got, but it's not a book that it's a YA fantasy, which I do enjoy, but only like a certain type, and this is just not really calling to me. We also have The Girl at Midnight by Melissa Gray, which is one of the oldest books on my TBR, like as in on Goodreads, but there's a reason for that, and that's because I don't really want to read it, so I'm going to get rid of the book I have. We also have The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. I read this one and I really loved it, but I don't think it's one that I'm going to reread, so I am going to give away my copy. I then have another 2 thrillers that I don't really want to read anymore because I've heard really negative reviews of. The first being 13 Minutes by Sarah Pinborough. I've heard lots of negative things about Sarah Pinborough as an author, as in her writing, not as in her as a person. I have no idea about her as a person, and I just don't think I really want to give it a go. And the other one is Her Name Was Rose by Claire Allen. Again, I asked Leanne to spoil this one for me because it wasn't really something, and then when she did I was like, I'm glad I didn't read that, so yay. Next up we have The Zombie Chronicles by Darren Shan. I do love a zombie novel, but I've never really got on with Darren Shan's writing, so this is not one I'm gonna give another go. And we also have The Stranger in My Home by Adele Parks. This one is a thriller that is about children, like babies being swapped at birth, and that is just a trope that I'm not that excited about. Next up we have Stolen by Lucy Christopher. This was a book that I actually thought was a like thriller, but it turns out it's more a contemporary about a woman who kind of fell in love with her captor, who's like kidnapped her at an airport, and I think it's about her essentially writing a letter to him. So it's not really a thriller, it's kind of contemporary, and it's not really what I was hoping for. And I have another 3 thrillers that I'm just not that excited by. First of those is Lying to You by Amanda Reynolds. One of my least favourite tropes in books is the kind of like wife that stands by her husband no matter what she's done, and this is exactly that. Then we have Baby Doll by Holly Overton, and I was excited to read this one until a long time ago I saw a review by Lauren from Lauren in the Books, who said that this was incredibly fat phobic, and that is just not something that I really want to associate myself with. And then we have The Book of You by Claire Kendall. Again, this one is about a woman who's terrified of her colleague and blah 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 blah, and I'm just not that excited by it. When I went to Scotland and Leanne gave me a load of books, one of the books that I have here that I'm actually unhauling is only because I already had a copy of this one. This is Mort by Terry Pratchett. She gave me a couple of Terry Pratchett books that she was unhauling. She's getting new copies, but I already have a copy of Mort, so I'm going to unhaul this one. Next up we have Sleep by C.L. Taylor. This is a thriller that I really enjoyed and I would highly recommend. However, I'm not going to reread it because I already know the twist, and it's not really... I don't really reread thrillers like this. I'm also going to get rid of The Bane Chronicles by Cassandra Clare. This again is part of the Shadowhunter world. I DNF'd this one. I only read the first story and I just wasn't like super excited. Magnus Bane is not one of my favourite characters, so I'm going to unhaul this one as well. I'm also getting rid of A Shade of Vampire by Bella Forrest. This is a vampire novel and I'm just not that excited about vampire novels anymore. Also, the writing in this is literally massive. Then we have Lips Touched 3 Times by Laini Taylor. Now, I love Laini Taylor, however, this is a novel about, I believe, goblins, yeah, it doesn't really call out to me. Then we have Thrill by Jackie Collins. Again, I'm not keeping Jackie Collins books anymore. I did used to love them when I was younger, but let's be fair, it's not, she's not really an author for me anymore. I'm then getting rid of the complete collection of Sherlock Holmes novel, short stories, I guess. I recently tried to read a few of them, and some of them I enjoy, but I generally don't particularly enjoy Sherlock stories. And I was talking to Leanne, and we basically determined that the only reason I'm keeping them is because I feel like I have to read them because they're like classics. And she was like, you don't need to read classics just because, like, for the sake of reading them. So it's going. Then we have The Last Act of Love by Kathy Rensenbrink. This is a non-fiction novel that I was excited to read, but having spoken to Leanne about it, not that she put me off it, it's just that it's not what I thought it was. I thought it was more about the relationship between the two, but Leanne said it's more a memoir of the girl who is dealing with things and that's not really kind of what I was hoping for in this. I'm also getting rid of A Merry Little Christmas by Debbie McComber. I don't actually like reading Christmas novels, it turns out, so I'm going to get rid of the ones I do own. I'm also controversially going to get rid of A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Backman. I just don't, it's literary fiction and it's just not really my bag. I'm also going to get rid of quite a few contemporary kind of like women's fiction that I had, not because I have any problem with them, just because for me they're not really books that I gravitate towards. So I'm going to get rid of Summer at Shell Cottage by Lucy Diamond. I do like Lucy Diamond's writing, but again, I'm just not gravitating towards her books. And in the same vein, I also have Hens Reunited by Lucy Diamond, the same thing. And I'm also going to get rid of Christmas Cakes and Mistletoe Nights by Carol Matthews. Again, Carol Matthews is an author I've enjoyed in the past, but I don't really like Christmas novels, and again, it's kind of women's contemporary that I'm not really like leaning towards. Next we have In the Midst of Life by Jennifer Worth. This is a part of the Call the Midwife series. Now, I've read the main trilogy of that and I enjoyed one of them more than the others, but the others have kind of been middle of the road, and I'm just not really gravitating towards this type of book anymore. I've also realised that I have The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry on my shelves, and I'm never going to read this. This is on my shelves because I think it's really pretty, and I bought it because a lot of people were talking about it, but it's literary fiction and it's not really something that actually interests me, so I'm not going to read it. We then have a book that is the sequel, Hunger by Michael Grant. This is the sequel to Gone, which I did really enjoy, but I read it ages ago and I'd need to reread it, and it's like 6 or 7 books in the series, so it's going. I'm also going to get rid of The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, which I know is very controversial. Again, I've had this on my shelf for literally 3 years and I just don't want to read it, so gone. I'm also getting rid of A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. This is the sequel and the middle book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. I don't want to read it, so bye. We then have Still Alice by Lisa Genova. I really, really want to read this, but it's about Alzheimer's and dementia and it's just too upsetting for me. Every time I think about reading this I get upset, so I don't think reading it is going to help. When I went into a charity shop in my hometown before I moved to where I am now, I picked these 3 books up because I thought I'm going to try something completely different, and then I completely differently left them on my shelf and didn't read them for ages, so I'm going to get rid of them now. We have The Harmony Silk Factory by Tash Orr. This is a book about, I have no idea, but I don't want to read it. We then have Sweet Française by Irene Nemirovsky. Again, don't really know what it's about, don't really know why I picked it up. And thirdly, we have The Phantom Players by Julian Lees. Again, no idea, but don't want to read them. And they're all like beige, like you can't even see them, they're so beige, like I don't care. Next up we have A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I read The Kite Runner and I loved it, but I think this is going to be just as heartbreaking, and I just don't think I'm there for it anymore. I just don't want to be like broken by a book. We then have The Versions of Us by Laura Barnett, which again I've had on my shelf for ages and haven't picked it up, and I feel like it's probably time to get rid of it, seeing as I still haven't read it. Gone. Next up, we don't really need to talk about this, but Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov is the most disgusting book I've ever read, and I only read 10 pages, so bye. We then have The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest by Stieg Larsson. This is the 3rd book in the Millennium Trilogy, and while I did enjoy this one, I don't think I'm going to read the series, so it can go. We then also have Anything You Do Say by Gillian McAllister. I will link down below my most recent reads video, but I didn't like this one, so it's gonna go. Another book that I DNF'd was Robin Hood by Henry Gilbert. Again, it's going. Then we have Mad About the Boy by Bridget Jones. No, it's not by Bridget Jones. Mad About the Boy, Bridget Jones by Helen Fielding. I really like the movies of this. I'm not that interested in reading the books anymore, so I'm gonna get rid. I've also decided I don't want to read the Throne of Glass series anymore. I read the first one and the short story collection that went with it, so I'm getting rid of Crown of Midnight and Heir of Fire. That one's actually signed, but it's going anyway. Also getting rid of Hollow City by Ransom Riggs. This is the sequel to Miss Peregrine's Home to Peculiar Children. I liked the first one, but I've heard that the rest of the series is pretty bad and I don't really want to read it. I then have a few classics that I'm just not that interested in reading anymore. The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje. I'm really sorry if I've said that wrong. I don't really want to read this one anymore, and I also don't really want to read Moby Dick by Herman Melville. And also I'm getting rid of Northanger Abbey, this copy, because I have another copy that's much more pretty up on my shelves. Next up, I'm getting rid of Everything Everything by Nicola Yoon. Again, this is a book that's been on my shelf for years and I still haven't read it, so it's going. I have a lot of Danielle Steele books on my shelves that I just don't really want to read anymore. So we have The Sins of the Mother. I have some others, but they're further on in the stacks. We then have We're All Completely Beside Ourselves by Karen Joy Fowler. I was spoilt for like the big twist in this, so I don't want to read it anymore. Then we have Black Box by Cassia Leo. I don't really know what this is about. I think it's kind of a love story, which you know is not really my bag. Then we have two books that I have read and loved but don't want to read anymore, and that is again Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children and also Six of Crows. Next up we have The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I've been keeping this on my shelves for ages, but I DNF'd The Secret History by Donna Tartt because I just couldn't get into it, and it's massive and I just don't want to even try. Then we have The 1+1 by Jojo Moyes. Again, this is women's contemporary fiction, and also Jojo Moyes wrote Me Before You, which was good at the time, but now I think about it, it's incredibly ableist, so I don't know that I want to give her another chance because the rest of that series was also rubbish. Then the next four are ones I've either read or DNF'd. The first two were DNFs. We have Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill. This book massively triggered me. This has a lot of talk about eating disorders and that kind of thing, and so this is not a book that I could actually finish. And I also DNF'd Hidden Figures by Margot Lee Shetterly. This has a lot of scientific speak in it and a lot of very technical language, and it just really wasn't for me. I also read The World's Wife by Caroline Duffy. This is a poetry collection, which is fine, but I didn't like it. And I also have Salem's Lot by Stephen King, which was part of my King Along, and I really enjoyed reading it, but I've read it now like 4 or 5 times, so I definitely am not going to reread. Next up we have Bitten by Kelly Armstrong. I've tried to read this book so many times and I just can't get through it, so I'm not going to keep it. Another two Danielle Steele books. We have Vanished and Golden Moments. We then have The Naughtiest Girl is a Monitor. This is the second book, I think, in the Naughtiest Girl series. In fact, I've also just spotted, no, that's the third one. The second one is The Naughtiest Girl again. I've read both of these and I've got the whole series, but I'm not going to keep them once I've read them. Sorry, babe. I then have a lot of the, what are these called? Don't know. We have The Custard Heart by Dorothy Parker, The Breakthrough by Daphne du Maurier, A Slip Under the Microscope by H.G. Wells, Television Was a Baby Crawling Toward That Death Chamber by Allen Ginsberg, and Letter from Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King. I've read these, really enjoyed them, some of them, and I'm now getting rid of them. We then have Toys by James Patterson. I normally like his books. This one was not really one of my favourites. We then have Linger by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the sequel to Shiver. I really enjoyed it and I do want to read the final one, but I'm not going to reread. Next up we have Shadows of the Workhouse by Jennifer Worth. Again, I've read this one. This is part of the Call the Midwife series. Again, I'm not rereading it. Then we have The Shining by Stephen King. Again, I've reread this many times and I'm not rereading it. We then have The Murders at White House Farm by Carol Ann Lee. This is a true crime about Jeremy Bamber and the murder of his family. I think this book was really poorly written, unfortunately. It talks too much about the history of his family's life rather than actually about him and whatever, but yeah, this was not my favourite true crime. And then also Unhauling Letha White by Robert Galbraith. We all know this is J.K. Rowling. I will not be continuing on this series, especially now I know what the 5th book is, and so although I read this one and really enjoyed it, I am not going to be keeping it around. We then also have The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I've now reread this I think 3 or 4 times, and while I do enjoy it as a book, I'm not going to reread it again. We're on to the final stack, guys. We have the Beano Annual of 2020. Although I love these, I don't reread them once I've read them. They're actually my dad's and he gives them to me. We then have Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig. I really enjoyed this one, but I think that this would do better going to somebody else who can also get a lot from this. Then we have Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I did really enjoy this one, but I don't foresee myself rereading it. I also really love the movie though. The movie I think I prefer to the book though. I'm also going to be getting rid of The Muse and The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. These are both, I believe, like kind of literary fiction historical novels, and I've had them on my shelf for ages and just don't really want to read them anymore. Sorry if there's a slight angle change, my phone just fell off the side. We also have I Know This Much Is True by Wally Lamb. This is a book that I have really wanted to read, but it's massive and I just can't bring myself to do it. Again, another Margaret Atwood book. We have Cat's Eye for the same reason as I've got rid of the other one. Next up we have Beautiful Disaster by Jamie Maguire. This is a YA romance, I think, and it's just not really for me. Then we have another Christmas novel. This is Last Christmas by Julia Williams, and so not going to be reading it. Oh, sorry, babe.
Oh, that brings tears twist your arm.
If I look like I'm crying, it's not. It's because I just threw the book to AJ and unfortunately he missed and it hit him right where it shouldn't have hit him. He'll be alright. Next up we have almost... Oh, you're alright, babe. I will. Next up we have... Oh, I know, I don't have space. Next up we have Almost Love by Louise O'Neill. This is another Louise O'Neill book. This again is a romance type of novel and it's about like abuse in a relationship, and it's just... I feel like it's going to be too sad. Then I have another 3 Danielle Steele books. We have Until the End of Time, Southern Lights, and Happy Birthday. And then the final one that I'm going to be unhauling is Cruel and Unusual by Patricia Cornwell. This is going to be in my next recent reads video though, so you can see my exact thoughts on this one in that video. But there you are guys, that is a long video, I know, but that is all of the books I'm unhauling. It was about half of the books that I had actually had on my shelves, but I really enjoyed the process, and a massive thank you to Leanne for helping me because she literally spent all day with me going through one book at a time. And yes, I will see you guys in the next video. I hope that you've enjoyed this one. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Let me know if there's any of these books you think I should give a second chance to. I'm not promising I will though, because my shelves are very full right now with books I'm actually excited to read. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys!